Next is one of the most famous battles in all of military history. This is where we get to see Hannibal at the height of his genius. This is where we find out why Kenny goes down in the annals of military scholarship as the battle. Why throughout time, many of the greatest generals, right down to the 20th century, have referred to it as a work of art. Though if there can be art in anything that involves so much slaughter, I really don't see it. But this is where we at least get to see Hannibal's greatest moment, achieving something often termed impossible in the study of military tactics: the encirclement of a greater army by a lesser army. This is where Hannibal pulls off one of the greatest mind games of all time. For you see, Hannibal deployed his troops in an inverted crescent, with his weakest infantry in the center of the arc, protruding toward the Roman line, and his strongest infantry on the flanks. As soon as Varro saw this, he redeployed his troops, and normally Roman infantry is spread out in a checkerboard-like pattern in order to give them more room to maneuver. But seeing the weakness of the Carthaginian center, Varro massed his troops in the middle, packing them close, hoping to use them as a ram to drive straight through the less reliable forces opposite them. But what he didn't know was that Hannibal had placed himself and his brother Mago in the center, as if to say to these troops, "We haven't abandoned you. If you die, we die too, so don't flee." And it worked. The Roman hammer smashed into the front line, but instead of causing a total rout, it simply forced the Carthaginian center back, step by step. And the Romans, seeing the center giving ground, kept pushing, until that inverted crescent began to right itself, and then started to push in. But during all of this, the better Carthaginian infantry, the ones on the flanks, hadn't given an inch. They were still where they were at the start of the battle, which now meant they were on the Roman flanks. Suddenly, infantry on the wings wheeled around and encircled the now overextended Roman center. At the same instant, the Carthaginian cavalry, which had driven the Roman cavalry off the field, swept into the back of the Roman line. The net was closed. That already tight Roman formation was pressed so close that men couldn't even raise their arms to swing their swords. It was a total slaughter. Hundreds of men were butchered each minute until sunset. Livy tells us the panic was so great at the Roman center, there were men who, out of manic terror, dug holes in the dirt and buried their heads up to their neck in the ground so they would suffocate to death. Of the 80,000 Romans who took the field that day, only 3,000 escaped. Turnus pleads with the Romans for command in Spain. He asks to be able to avenge his father and uncle and to bring glory to Rome. And despite his youth, the Romans elect him to go. Livy tells us, though, that it's not because they had any special confidence in this 25-year-old, or because of the honor they gave to his desire to avenge his father, but rather because everyone else considered a command in Spain suicide, and he was the only one who volunteered to take it on. But it turns out they chose the right man for the job. Without telling anyone except Gaius Laelius, his close friend and the commander of the fleet that was to accompany him, Scipio did the unthinkable, and with his inferior force, raced for the Carthaginian capital in Spain, Carthago Nova. Because the action was unthinkable and he hadn't told anyone his plan, not even the sub-commanders in his army, he was able to reach Carthago Nova completely by surprise. He rapidly began to assail the city. With his first attack, he tried to lure the defenders out of the city, and almost succeeded in forcing his way in, but was beaten back. Later that day, he attacked again, this time with a trick up his sleeve. He ordered his men to attack from all sides, including an assault from the harbor which Gaius Laelius and his marines had taken. He then ordered a contingent of 500 of his men to wait near a lagoon that abutted the wall of the city. And then a squall came in, just as Scipio expected. His men hadn't expected it, so to them it looked like magic as the winds drained the lagoon and allowed them to easily cross. They assaulted the section of the wall that no one had thought to defend because the lagoon made it unassailable. And with all the defenders tied up with the other assaults, these 500 men opened the city, and the Romans made short work of the garrison, brutally slaughtering anyone they found until the commander of the garrison surrendered.